Okay. All right. We will call our meeting to order. We want to welcome everybody here this evening. Right now, our city clerk, Melissa, will take roll call.
Commissioner Swindell?
Here.
Commissioner York?
Here.
Commissioner Maples?
Here.
Mayor Van Oster?
Here.
And Vice Mayor Doan is absent this evening.
All right. Next on our agenda is the invocation. And tonight we have Pastor Joel Thompson from the Coffeyville Central Nazarene Church this evening to lead us in our prayer. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Madam Mayor, City Commissioners, staff, friends, I just want to thank you again for the opportunity to come here and just start the city meeting in the name of our Lord. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we just come to you tonight, and God, we just want to thank you. There's so much that we see going wrong in our world, and God, even if we look at our own town, we can see those things too. But God, I choose to look at everything that you've created. I choose to look at the beauty in our town, the wonderful people that we have, and God, I just want to thank you for those things. God, I want to thank you for amazing staff and our elected officials that put aside their time and just do everything they can to work to better our community. And God, I just lift our community up to you today. God, I pray for a renewal of all the economic programs that I know the city's been working on. God, I pray for a revival of our people. And God, I just pray that we can look back a year from today and say, wow, can you believe that's where we started? Because this is what we're dealing with today. And God, I know I will be lifting you up and saying, God, it's because of you and your amazing grace. So, God, we just want to thank you. God, I pray that you are with all of our commissioners and our mayor as they deal with the business of our city. God, help guide them and direct them. And, God, I just pray it's all in your glory. We ask this in your name. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Pastor.
Thank you, Pastor.
Okay, now moving on, we'll have a quick review of our agenda. Is there anything anybody wants to add or change on this for this evening?
I had nothing there.
Okay, if you all have nothing, we will move on. Next item is our consent agenda. The first item under the consent agenda is the City Commission meeting minutes from Tuesday, July 12th, 2022. And the second item is our 2022 appropriation ordinance number AO-22-14 in the amount of $5,907,562.94. Commissioner York, do you have anything on the appropriation ordinance?
Yes. So the city of Coffeyville, so this is for power to the different parts of the city, $40,140. Our Aspen Tree Service that does our trimming for the power lines, $10,139. Grand River Dam Authority, $3,704,683. Hample Oil Distributors, so this is jet fuel for the airport, $34,838. Kansas Department of Health, $17,246. KMGA Gas Supply Operating Fund, $671,733. Midwest Electric Transformers for $10,490. Republic Service for our residential services, $37,675. Southwest Power Pool for transmission services, $697,900. Southwestern Power Administration for 622 Energy Purchase, $16,615. Struckle Electric, $84,569. And then our payroll for $418,094.
Okay. Thank you, Bob. Does anybody else have anything? off of the appropriation ordinance they want to bring out? Okay, if not, I will move to approve items 1 and 2 of the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Motion is made by Mayor Van Oster, seconded by Commissioner York, to approve items 1 and 2 of the consent agenda as presented. Commissioner Swindell,
Aye.
Commissioner York,
Aye.
Commissioner Maples,
Aye.
Mayor Van Oster.
Aye. The third item on our consent agenda is the 2022 appropriation ordinance number AO-22-14A for Isham's Hardware in the amount of $127.28.
Madam Mayor, if there are no questions, I'll move to approve item 3 of the consent agenda as presented.
I'll second.
Motion is made by Commissioner York, seconded by Commissioner Swindell, to approve item 3 of the consent agenda as presented. Commissioner York,
Aye.
Commissioner Maples,
Aye.
Mayor Van Oster,
Abstain.
Commissioner Swindell.
Aye.
Okay. Our next item, comments from the public. Any citizen desiring to address the commission shall be recognized, advance to the podium, state his, her name, and address for the record. Comment shall be limited to 3 minutes unless extended by a vote of the majority of the commission. The commission does not hear matters involving litigation or city personnel. The commission does not take action on subjects that are not on the agenda unless unusual or hardship conditions exist. Citizens may address the commission on agenda items as they are brought to the floor. Do we have anybody here this evening? Yes, sir?
Good evening, Madam Mayor and Commissioners. My name is Rodney Allison. I live at 612 West 5th Street. I'm here this evening as a concerned grandpa, a concerned citizen, and someone who's spent his adult life in the public safety arena. I'd like to address a traffic problem, I know you like to hear that, on West 5th Street. I've put off coming here to address this issue for far too long, and I'm really surprised that we haven't had a serious motor vehicle accident, a pedestrian vehicle accident in the area of 6 and 700 block of West 5th. There's a lot of foot traffic that comes down Grant and Washita from First Street. Baby strollers, wagons, people walking north and south in that area. And 5th Street, if you travel it at all, you know it's pretty wide open right in through there. You could land a Cessna 152 on it. You know, it's pretty much like that. And there's an awful lot of, I won't say an awful lot, there's too much drag racing in that area. I've spoken with the police chief about that. I'm no stranger to the fire department, police department, EMS, so I have a little bit different perspective. But something's going to happen sometime. And like I said, I'm surprised it hasn't already, because I've seen drag racing, motorcycles and cars, and if a little kid drops a ball out in the street, if a dog runs out in front of somebody doing 60 miles an hour, they're going to end up in somebody's yard or in their house or around a tree. And I don't want to see that happen. Certainly we don't want any kind of loss of life. So I thought the best thing I could do would be to bring it here, voice my concern. As Quinn, and I was a reserve police officer back in the 80s when Quinn and Kelly Stewart were reserve officers. So, you know, I have a little bit of background there and 27 years in the fire department. So I feel like that it's better to do something before, you know, we do have a problem. And the police department, they're hamstrung, you know, with staffing issues, and they can't dedicate someone to babysit any particular area of town for speeders. You know, they get calls they get all sorts of routine calls they have to go handle. So as soon as, they may be there for 15 minutes and all is great, but you know as well as I do that it can turn around on a dime as soon as they leave. As far as what kind of a resolution, I've run this thing through in my mind many times. From the 400 block to the 1400 block is a pretty good strip of road with nothing to break it up. On 4th Street, we have dips. And if they want to go airborne, they can go airborne on that. But 5th Street's pretty flat and straight. I don't know what they do before they hit Washita, 5th and Washita, but they get wound up after that. So with school getting ready to start again and everything,
So we have stops at Spruce, correct?
pardon?
There is a stop sign there at Spruce that they have to stop at, or is it?
No.
It's not. No.
No.
It's next block down.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Willow.
yeah, yeah,
Willow.
Willow, they have to stop. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I hate to broach the subject of stop signs, but a stop sign at 5th and Washita at least would break it up a little bit. And in my visit with the police chief, he supported that idea. And like I said, we all know their staffing situation, so I'll just let it go at that. But I wanted to bring that here tonight, just to voice my concern before something happens. Thank you very much.
Could I ask,
Thank you.
is there, and I know this seems, is it usually during daylight hours, or is it, I mean, just, is it more anytime throughout the day?
More prevalent. Go ahead.
It can be about any time.
Anytime, okay.
You know,
I just didn't know if there was,
There's no real particular time of the day. There's really no pattern. You know, it just depends upon who meets at that location on 5th Street.
Does it change any during the school year? I mean, are these, is it more of a high school age and older, or, and these are just, maybe we can try to.
I really don't
really
think
do
so.
something.
I really
Okay.
don't think so. It's just, it's not so much the age group as the maturity level.
Okay. Okay. Well, and I'm sorry for asking that. That was just,
No,
if you try to get is when you see it, which you have, is there something where, not only if we did something like a stop sign, but then there's a time frame where we could really enforce it, that setting the tone that you need to stop here and us enforce it. If it's, from here to here, then it's well worth that effort to get that slowed down.
Understood. Yeah.
So, but it's kind of all over.
There's really no pattern. It's,
Okay.
not that I can detect.
We'll see what we can do. Thank
You
you.
can ask. Thank you.
Appreciate you
Thank
bringing
you
it to us.
very
Yes,
much
yes,
for
thank
coming
you.
up. Okay, anybody else this evening? Okay, if not, we will move on to our regular agenda items. The first one, we have public hearings, special presentations, and proclamations. Tonight, we have the City of Coffeyville audit report for last fiscal year, 2021. And this evening, Kyle Spielbush, is that correct? CPA with Jared Gilmore and Phillips is here to make the presentation. Welcome, Kyle.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm here to walk you through your blue packet here and just kind of point out some things that I think might be of importance to you. Like usual, there's those letters at the front, and we'll hit those at the very end of the presentation. We'll actually start with pages 1 through 3. Pages 1 through 3 is the independent audit report. That's the only thing in this blue packet that actually belongs to us as auditors.
Right.
Everything else in here is your information and your numbers, and we just take it and put it in the prescribed format by KMAG. You will notice that this report did change slightly. Some new regulations came out to bump those opinion paragraphs up toward the front. I assume it's because they didn't want to make people read 3 pages to get to the most important part. So they bumped them up at the beginning to kind of speed that report up. That first paragraph is what we audited, which is the fund summary statement of regulatory basis receipts, expenditures, and unencumbered cash balances for the city for the year ended 12/31/2021. That next paragraph touches on the adverse opinion on U.S. GAAP financials. Since we elect to follow KMAG, which is a modified cash basis of accounting, we have to issue what they call an adverse opinion on GAAP financials because you'd have material differences for things such as receivables, prepaids, liabilities would show up on your financial statement. With KMAG, you simply have cash and accounts payable. That third paragraph is the most important one in here, and that's that unmodified opinion on regulatory basis of accounting. We issue the unmodified opinion on the city's financial statement, which is the best opinion the city can receive. We believe that the numbers presented in this booklet are a material accurate representation of what happened during the year. Those next two paragraphs kind of touch on that adverse and unmodified opinion with KMAG. Down there at the bottom, we start about responsibilities of management, and that carries over to page 2. I'm just talking about management's responsible for making sure the information in here is correct and accurate, as well as making sure that all our controls, our checks and balances are operating effectively throughout the year. That next section touches on our responsibility as auditors, and we audit according to generally accepted auditing standards, and then that KMAG, that Kansas Municipal Audit and Accounting Guide. Finally, those last couple paragraphs that span page 2 and page 3 talk about some other matters regarding our supplementary information. Towards the back of this booklet, we have some supplementary schedules, which we'll look at later, as well as it talks about how we put the comparative information from the prior year, just to kind of give you an idea from one year to the next, the trends of what's happened with the city. If you turn over to page 4 and 5, this is our financial statement. This is kind of the meat and potatoes of the audit. This gives you a quick snapshot of what happened with each fund of the city. Over there on the far left, you can see we list out all the various funds. And then we have our beginning unencumbered cash balances, or our cash carryover for budget purposes. That next column is going to be any canceled encumbrances from the prior year. And the next one is receipts, that money we brought in, and then expenditures, that money we sent out the door, to finally come to our ending unencumbered cash balance. Now with KMAG, there's about a 10-page checklist of some various regulations and statutes that the city is required to adhere to. One of those is that each fund ends in a positive cash balance. So as you can see, as you glance through that column, we met that requirement. All our funds had a positive cash balance. That next column is going to be our accounts payable, those bills that we get in January, February for services that back from December and November. And then we finally get our ending cash in bank, the far right column. If you look over at page 5, down there towards the bottom, we do break out based on all the various accounts held by the city. I always like to point out that there is that amount down there towards the bottom that we subtract out from those funds, and that's those agency funds, which we'll see a supplementary schedule at the back, and those are going to be those funds that the city holds, but they don't necessarily belong to us, and it could be things such as sales tax, utility deposits, those kinds of things. If you turn over to page 6, now we get to the footnotes for the audit. Footnote number 1 that spans page 6 all the way through page 9 is a pretty cookie cutter footnote that repeats year after year. Just kind of some basic information about KMAG, about how budgets operate within the state, as well as the makeup of our city and related municipal entities. I encourage you to read through that each year, kind of refamiliarize yourself with that, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that footnote. One thing I always do like to point out is there on page 9 at the very top, we just disclose any kind of budget amendments that we have during the year. And as you can see, we had a fair number of budget amendments. Those funds are listed out there in that last sentence of that first paragraph. Footnote number 2 down there at the bottom is our stewardship, compliance, and accountability footnote, or I like to refer to this one as that KMAG checklist footnote. If we had any issues with that checklist, this is where you're going to see them pop up. That first paragraph there on page 9, that just talks about that positive unencumbered cash balance back on statement 1, as well as we'll see a budgetary comparison schedule stating that we were under budget in all our funds. If you turn over to page 10, we have some bond covenants that we have to meet with our revenue bonds. The first one is that we have to have principal and interest account for the 2015B revenue bond. We require a certain amount to be in there. As you can see, we more than met that by about a little under $12,000, excuse me. And then we also have another requirement where we have to have the maximum amount that we would ever have to pay for principal and interest with that bond held in reserves as well. And you can see we more than met that requirement. You look down there at the total, and we were well over by roughly $9 million. And that paragraph just gives a little more information about that. If you turn over to page 11 with those bonds, we also have a net income requirement. We're required to be 125% of the required principal and interest of the next year. So that amount was 4.1 million, and then the amount of net income was 9.5, and that was 231% of that amount. So we more than met that requirement. Finally, that little paragraph there on page 11, that last one, it talks about one minor violation with our treasurer's report. You're required to publish quarterly treasurer's report in the newspaper within 30 days at the end of the month, of the next month. We had 1 month that was, or one quarter that was late, and then the other quarter we actually submitted on time to the newspaper. It just never got published. So we have to just report that there 2 of those 4 quarters were late. Footnote number 3 deals with our deposits and investments. Here we just list out some investments that the city holds. We have a couple of 43,000 agency money market funds that are going to mature in less than 1 year. And then we have 13.6 million with the federal agency of 1 to 5 year maturity. And then we also have our Kansas investment pool amount of 10.3 million. Those next couple paragraphs there on the bottom of page 11 and carrying over to that first one on page 12 talk about some various regulations and requirements as a municipality regarding our funds. Things such as we have to hold the money in counties we operate or surrounding counties. Our money has to be secured at year end, as well as limiting where we can go putting our money to invest it. We can't go put it in the stock market. It's too risky for municipal funds. With that in mind, that second paragraph on page 12 gets into information pertaining to the city. As you can see, at year end, our carrying amount of deposits was a little over $41 million, and the bank balance was a little over $42 million. That roughly $400,000 difference is just going to be due to outstanding items at year end that hadn't cleared the bank. Of that bank balance, $290,000 was covered by FDIC insurance coverage, and that remaining roughly $42 million was covered with pledged securities, more than meeting that requirement to be secured. Those last 2 paragraphs kind of touch on that KMIP a little more. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on those. Footnote number 4 deals with our capital lease obligations. This just goes into a little more detail about our capital lease for the purchase of a fire truck. We list out what the future payments are for the next duration of that lease, and then we subtract out our imputed interest or our finance charge to get to our net present value, or kind of that principal balance that's left over on that lease. Then we subtract out our current maturities, those that are going to be paid in the next year, to get to that final long-term capital lease obligation. Now, if you turn over to page 13 through 15, you'll see this lease pop up here again. This is our long-term debt schedule. This just kind of gives you a quick glance of all the debt instruments that the city holds. We've got our beginning balance at the beginning of the year of a little over $68.5 million. And then our any additions, which we had none, and then our reductions or payments to get to that ending balance of a little under $66 million. Excuse me. And then that final right column is going to be our interest paid for the year. On pages 14 and 15, this is where we get to those future debt payments. This is a really good tool when it comes to budgeting time, just to kind of give you an idea of when those future payments are going to come due. 1 year might be quite a bit larger than the next, just kind of give you an idea that, hey, we need to start planning to build up funds for that year. So it's a really good tool to review each year when it comes time for budget. And then we carry over on page 16 with those bonds that we defeased in the prior year. Those were still technically outstanding at 12/31/2021, but they're not on the city's books because we defeased those with other bonds, and we just have to disclose what that current amount is of $38.3 million. Footnote number 6 deals with operating leases. This is going to be for any equipment that we're not going to actually own at the end of the lease. We're just renting it for the use. We have some office equipment that we rent for a little over $3,700, and then any future amounts that we've agreed to, we disclose those down below. Footnote number 7 deals with our industrial revenue bonds, or our IRBs. We can give some bonds to businesses, kind of encourage them to come to the area. We're just required to disclose what that amount is outstanding at year end of a little over $5.5 million. Footnote number 8 is our defined benefit pension plan footnote, or our CAPERS footnote. Those first 2 paragraphs are on page 16 that carry over to page 17. Pretty general information about CAPERS. They don't change much year in, year out. Now, that first big paragraph on page 17 gets into information pertaining to the city. So for the year ended 12/31/2021, the CAPERS employer's rate was 8.87%, and then KPNF was 22.8%. And then we just disclose the amount that we remitted, a little over $521,000 for capers, and a little over $601,000 for KP&F on behalf of our employees. That next paragraph, always the scariest footnote in here, that's that net pension liability. That's that amount the city would be on the hook for if the state ever quit funding capers. Obviously, we don't ever foresee that happening, but since it's an underfunded plan, we are required to disclose that amount. You can see for capers, it's a little over $3.5 million, and KP&F a little under $4.7 million, so quite large. I do like to point out that those numbers actually did decrease quite a bit compared to the prior year, just based on their actuary study and things of those nature. Footnote number 9 is our other long-term obligations from operations. That first paragraph just talks about an additional 1% for death and disability insurance for capers that's added on. And then the remaining part talks about our compensated absence policy. We just kind of calculate what the dollar amount of those carryover hours are from one year to the next. And if you turn over to page 18, under that numbered list, we calculate what that amount is. For vacation benefits, it's a little over $830,000, and then compensatory time, it's a little over $66,000. Just simply taking those hours that carry over times their rate at year end. Footnote number 10 deals with our capital projects, kind of those big projects, one-time projects we got going on. We just disclosed the name of all those projects, the authorized dollar amount, whether that's through resolution, through grants, through bonds, the expended amount through 12/31/21, and then the current status of when we estimate that project will be complete. Footnote number 11 deals with our loans receivable. We received some various loans or various dollars through the Community Development Fund that we were able to loan out as well. And we just simply disclose what that dollar amount is of those loans are at year end. A little over $71,500 for economic development loans, $2,700 for community development loans, and then about $228,000 for public housing loans. Footnote number 12 is our economic dependency. Since we collect almost 65% of our electric utility funds from Coffeyville Resources, we're just required to disclose that, if that were to ever be decreased or go out of business, that could be a huge loss to the city. So, we're kind of economically dependent on them for our electric utilities. Footnote number 13 is the risk management footnote. Cookie cutter footnote doesn't change much year in, year out, basically stating that we mitigate our risk of loss through the purchase of insurance. Footnote number 14 is any other commitments and contingencies that we have. We just talk about how we have an agreement with the Grand River Dam Authority for the purchase of electrical services until June of 2042. Footnote 15 is a repeat one kind of from last year dealing with COVID-19, basically just stating it's still ongoing, still could have potential impacts. We can't estimate what those are. We're just required to put that in here. That second paragraph does talk about the ARPA money we received of a little over $700,000, and then we just disclose that we hadn't spent any as of year end. Footnote number 16 deals with our interfund transfers. The biggest thing to pull from this footnote is just that all our transfers had statutory authority to be made during the year. And finally, footnote number 17 is our subsequent events. Anything that would have happened from the end of the year to the date that we issued this audit report, kind of large or out of the ordinary. This is where we would disclose it. We really didn't have anything to disclose to that effect. If you turn over to page 22, we get into Schedule 1. This is that budgetary comparison schedule I mentioned earlier. Over there on the far left, we list out all the various budgeted funds of the city, and then we have our total certified budget. And then we have our adjustments for qualifying budget credits. These are going to be things such as reimbursed expense, grant proceeds, loan proceeds, kind of anything where the city's not necessarily using our funds to pay for it. We expect to be reimbursed through some form or fashion to pay for that. Sometimes called budget extenders as well. And then we add those two to get our total certified budget, and we compare that to our expenditures charged to each of those funds. And then that far right column is always that most important one. The one time where a negative number is a good thing. As a glance through there, you can see all our numbers were negative, so we were under budget in all the funds. Schedule 2 on page 23 that goes all the way back to page 65 is our individual fund summary statement schedules. I'm not going to go through each one of these with you, but I encourage you to review these on your own time. We list out all the various types of receipts and expenditures we might receive, things such as taxes, charges for services. It just goes into more detail as far as where our money came from and where our money went. On the expenditure side, we really have four major categories for KMAG. You have personal services, which is going to be our wages and fringe benefits, contractual services, any other kind of services we're procuring, commodities, anything we can touch, and then capital outlay, kind of those large one-time expenditures. So I encourage you to read through those, kind of glance and see, what happened one year to the next as we provide those prior year numbers in there. And then you can also compare it to your budget by line item, kind of give you an idea of where you close on your budget or not. One thing to always remember is that budget, you're bound by the total budget, not necessarily by line item. If you turn all the way back to pages 66 and 67, we have a couple additional schedules as well. Schedule 3 are those agency funds that I mentioned earlier. You can see we list the 4 that the city has, and then we just simply have our beginning balance, money brought in, money sent out, and then our ending balance that ties back to that statement 1. And finally, page 67 is our Schedule 4. This is another bond covenant that we have, just required to put here in the audit, that we prove that we have insurance for our plants and things of those nature, that it's active, and then we also just disclose the number of users at the beginning and end of the year. Now, if you go back to those letters at the front of your packet, we actually have 2 letters in here. The first 2 pages are the presentation letter. This is, once again, another boilerplate letter. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. In the past, if we were to ever have issues with management, Stephanie, Mark, getting the information we needed, we could disclose that orally to the commission. Now we're just required to put that in writing. We didn't have any issues to disclose, but I encourage you to read through that, kind of maybe see those things we might approach you about. That third page in there is our audit adjustments. As you can see, really short. That speaks to the quality of your staff and the accuracy of the numbers at the year end, when we come for audit. So that's really great. Some cities have 3, 4, 5 pages of audit adjustments. So one small adjustment is great. And then finally, those last 2 pages that are front and back at the back are called our management representation letter. Sometimes we refer to this as that reminder letter. During the audit, we should have touched on each one of these numbered points. So that's why we call that reminder letter. It's good for the commission, for management, to read that each year, kind of see those various things we might approach you about, and kind of put them in the back of your mind that, hey, something happened with this one. We need to make sure to remember that when it comes time for audit. So with that being said, do we have any questions?
Well, it's wonderful that there are no significant findings. I think that's great, and it does speak to the quality of our staff very
Sure.
much. So,
And as I visited with you the other day about the questions that you asked, I truly believe our staff does a great job, and you can see that in what you've presented to us. They try to keep our city going with what we have and the bare minimum. We still have the same infrastructure as we had 20, 30, 40 years ago, but we have, of course, less people. So they really do a very good job of making sure that our money is spent respectfully, as it's the taxpayers' money. And I think they are to be commended, and as your audit shows, and thank you for your work on this too.
absolutely.
And very important. Thank you very much. Anything else for him? Anybody else have anything? Okay, that's it. All right.
Thank you, Kyle.
Thank
You guys
you,
have a good
Kyle,
evening.
Yes,
for
thank you.
coming. We appreciate it. Okay. All right,
Good job, Steph.
yeah.
It takes all of us to do that.
Aren't we being modest?
We have a good staff.
Yes, we do. Okay, moving on to old business. We are now going into a couple of second readings that we have to finish up these ordinances this evening. First one is we have the second reading of Ordinance G 22-04, an ordinance to adopt the 2022 Uniform Public Offense Code. And as you will remember, this was presented at our last meeting on July 14th, I think it was. Stephanie presented these and we passed to the first reading. So now this is just a housekeeping matter that we must bring up the second reading. So if there's no questions, I will move to approve the second reading of Ordinance G-22-04 as presented.
Second.
Motion is made by Mayor Van Oster, seconded by Commissioner Maples to approve the second reading of Ordinance G-22-04 as presented. Commissioner Maples.
Aye.
Mayor Van Oster.
Aye.
Commissioner Swindell.
Aye.
Commissioner York.
Aye.
Okay, the next one is we have the second reading of Ordinance G-22-05, an ordinance to adopt the 2022 Standard Traffic Ordinance. Once again, this was presented at our last meeting in July, and we are finishing up with the second reading to have it officially passed.
Mayor, if there are no questions, I'll move to approve the second reading of ordinance G-2205 as presented.
I'll second.
Motion is made by Commissioner York, seconded by Commissioner Swindell to approve the second reading of Ordinance G-22-05 as presented. Mayor Van Oster.
Aye.
Commissioner Swindell.
Aye.
Commissioner York.
Aye.
Commissioner Maples.
Aye.
Okay. All right, we now move on to new business. Our first item is Resolution R-22-47, which is a resolution to authorize purchase of 8 sets of Wildland firefighting gear for the Coffeyville Fire Department. Here this evening, our Fire Chief Kenny Ward will make comments.
Thank you, Mayor and Commission and staff. What I have before you for approval is 2022 50/50 matching grant from the Kansas Forest Services Volunteer Fire Assistance Cooperative Fire Protection Group program. The total is $7,000. However, we have to purchase the 8 sets of gear, and then the Forest Department will reimburse us the $3,500 once all the bills are paid and we receive the gear. This is actually to finish last year. You all approved 11 sets through this same grant program, and this is the 8 sets remainder to get everyone in a set of wildland gear. And I will tell you that this wildland gear also, if we have a extrication call, the guys will put this gear on too. So it's not just wildland gear; they use it for their extrication gear as well. So
And what's the primary use of this gear?
for grass fires,
Grass.
predominantly, I mean that's what we got the award for. I'm just letting you know that they also use it because it's a lot lightweighter, a lot lighter in weight, and so sometimes when we're on our motor vehicle accidents for a long time, it can prevent them.
Based off the name, I figured it's probably what it was. but
Yes,
just wanted
sir.
to make
Yes,
sure.
sir.
Yeah, yeah.
It's kind of like our hazmat stuff. We can use it for other activities outside of just our hazmat responses.
All right. Does anybody else have any other questions? Okay, if not, I will move to approve Resolution R-22-47 as presented.
Second.
Motion is made by Mayor Van Oster, seconded by
Chief.
Commissioner York to approve Resolution R-22-47 as presented. Commissioner Swindell.
Aye.
Commissioner York.
Aye.
Commissioner Maples.
Aye.
Mayor Van Oster.
Aye. Thank you.
Thank
You have something else?
Well, I was just going to, I hope this is an appropriate time. Just, the last time I was up here was for the structure gear, and I know Commissioner Doan had asked that if we were going to continue to seek grant funding, and I know we got notification last week that Magellan Midstream Partners is donating $9,500 for a large thermal imager that we can
Okay.
use in our salvage and overhaul. It actually has a range finder also, so if the police could use it if they're looking for somebody in the dark, it'll actually find them way out and tell them exactly how far they are. So it's a pretty cool piece of equipment that they have graciously donated. Just took a letter and being nice.
Okay.
One other thing too, and I hate to take your time, but
No, you're
wanted to
fine.
let you know that through Lieutenant Cazzo's efforts on the Homeland Security Committee, we were able to move our 2023 project from a $30,000 application to a $65,000 application to actually purchase a new truck to pull the new gooseneck trailer that we have already ordered. And so that was a $110,000 project, but the trailer came in at $100,000. So Lieutenant Cazzo presented it and staff presented it to get the bottles changed to a truck, because we felt like that it'd be easier for us to find 30 than 65. So that was some other great news, and we'll be able to order that vehicle September 1st.
Okay.
Sad thing is we won't get either one of them for probably a year, but
Yes.
at least knowing that we're getting it is
That's a good thing.
So,
Okay, great.
job,
Thank
Chief.
you very much. Appreciate it. Okay, we will now move on to our second item under new business, which is a resolution R-22-48, is a resolution to execute a memorandum of understanding and non-disclosure agreement with AT&T and the City of Coffeyville for the purpose of having a pole attachment inventory audit completed. This evening, our Director of Electric Services, Mr. Mike Shook, will make comments.
Good evening, Mayor Commissioners. The city has pole attachment agreements with AT&T and Cox Communications, where these communication utilities, through these attachment agreements, are allowed to place wireline attachments onto city-owned utility poles. As part of these agreements, each attacher is required to pay the city an annual fee per attachment per pole. The city also has electric utility infrastructure attached onto some AT&T-owned poles, which the city pays an equal attachment fee to AT&T for these attachments. Due to the lack of available records by both parties, an accurate count of poles and attachments is being desired for billing purposes. City staff, assisted by City Attorney Paul Kreitz and outside counsel Healy Law, have been working with AT&T to develop an agreement to move forward in selecting a mutual agreed-upon firm to conduct a pole attachment inventory audit, agreeing on Spartan Utility Services. Staff will be bringing an engagement proposal from Spartan Utility Services to you at a later meeting to seek approval. The Memorandum of Understanding sets out the rules and the determinants for the audit that will be followed by the city and AT&T, guiding Spartan through the process. In addition to the MOU, AT&T is requesting execution of a non-disclosure agreement, which has been included in your packet. Therefore, staff is recommending that the mayor be authorized to execute a memorandum of understanding between the City of Coffeyville and AT&T for the purpose of completing a pole attachment inventory audit for the electric utility. And I'd be happy to try to answer any questions that you may have. I may have to look over at Paul.
Out of all that, I mean, the only thing I was really curious about is why the non-disclosure? I mean, it's not,
Because we exchange GIS information and pole locations, they want to keep that to themselves.
okay.
I will say, for the last 12 years, this has been on our radar to get taken care of. We've changed, in this process, we're renegotiating pole attachment fees are currently at $5 per pole a year. We're looking at increasing those, but it doesn't make any sense unless you know how many attachments are out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So I
it's
think
been-
we've left a lot on the table
Okay.
over the years.
So it's been at least, when was the last time you did have a full?
I
You
don't know that
don't
we've
know?
ever had an audit, to
Okay.
my knowledge.
Okay.
We've
Well,
just
then I
historically went
understand.
off.
I understand why you would want that,
Yeah.
yes, like you said, to make sure how many and so forth. So, okay. Does anybody have any other questions for Mike? Okay, if not, I will move to approve Resolution R-22-48 as presented.
Second.
Motion is made by Mayor Van Oster, seconded by Commissioner Maples to approve Resolution R-22-48 as presented. Commissioner Swindell.
Aye.
Commissioner York.
Aye.
Commissioner Maples.
Aye.
Mayor Van Oster.
Aye.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Commissioners.
Mike, very much. Okay, we will now move on to our city manager's report for this evening.
Mayor and Commissioners, first I'd like to say that Mayor Van Oster sent an email that went to department heads, and they truly appreciated it. it was in thanking them for what they do and for the budget process that everyone participated in, and they know, and as a commission, you know, that what staff's trying to do is worthwhile and important. So I want to express from the department heads back to you, to the commission, one, you're welcome, and it's truly our honor and privilege to do that. So I'm just not putting it in an email. I'm going to say it formally. But it is one of those that it is always a process this time of year to get through budget, and I'm very proud of what they do and what they sacrifice. We are getting stronger and things will improve, and we are getting to the point that, except for a little more COVID left, it is that we can see the light in the tunnel. I know next year, the remainder of this year will go out with a bang, and a lot of things will be happening next year. A lot of improvements throughout the town. Sales tax starts for parks downtown and housing. A lot of things are going to come together, and it does seem like a long time, but I think that's simply the past 2 years and COVID and people not being in offices that we need to talk to, or changing jobs and this, but it has seemed that it fishtailed for a long time, but now it's kind of straightening out, so we're excited. I know you're aware that the department's this heat. We asked that, you know, the community, Mike was on, was it a phone-in, Mike? Yes, on things that you can do, and we might look at something next meeting, especially if this heat doesn't break, you know, to lower energy use. There's simple things that make sense, and, you know, I was pretty impressed to hear what he had to say, and, you know, anywhere from, you know, washing and drying clothes, you know, in the cooler parts of the day, instead of the heat of the day. And it was just simple things like that that you start going, that's going to get us through, because it seems like it's going to be relentless until fall. So things are dry and that. Our chief, I commended him. It is one of those, we have notify the public, you know, burn ban is not the time, you know, to be burning. It can get away. I'm glad we got through the 4th of July, but it's even drier than the 4th of July. And so, all in all, staff appreciates what you do for them. They do want to thank you for looking at the budget and understanding their wants and needs. I shouldn't say wants, more of their needs. And do want to sit there and remind, none of this is possible without the commission. None of us have the authority to vote. So it rests on the 5 commissioners' shoulders to where the city goes. And that is something that I know we take for granted because you show up at meetings and you go through the process. But it is important. We do not go anywhere unless we have your approval to go. So I want to thank you as a commission for being a great commission. And we'll look forward to that announcement when we approve of what we've done for the taxpayers in the budget. So if there's any questions, I'd be glad to answer those.
Okay.
There we go.
No. Okay, we will now move on to comments from commissioners and staff. Do we have anything?
Well, so August 6th will be Vaudeville, which is a fundraiser for the Midland Foundation. Encourage folks to reach out to a Midland board member, get your tickets. It's a very worthwhile show. So, and then actually at Rotary today, we had a presentation from Mike Bradley, the president of the Fair Board this year, and remind everybody the Interstate Fair and Rodeo is coming up. So, again, get your fund passes and please attend. It's a great event.
That's correct. That's correct. The only thing I have to say is I want to go back to the comment you made about the email that I sent, which was on behalf of all of us together. And that budget process is pretty amazing to see what all comes together with it, knowing how long you all work on that, starting back in the beginning of the year and really in depth, April, May, June, to present us that very large notebook that I love to look at, that which I do, and it's fascinating to see what all it takes to run our city, and like I said, the integrity that our staff puts on handling those funds correctly, so we can be respectful to our taxpayers and try to get things done, because that's what it's going to take. And it will be exciting this next year when we start seeing the results of the sales tax, which we owe our citizens for passing. We really do last year, and it'll be great to see a lot of those things get put to good use and see what we can do out of those.
Can we, I don't know, I'm in the mood to, I've been moved. Can we give our finance director a round of applause?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I just felt so moved that I had to mention that.
Yeah.
Surprised she still has hair left.
Yeah. Yes, very good. That's, that was well deserved, yes.
Yes.
So, anyway, okay, but that's all I have. Anybody else? Okay, we will now move on, and I make a motion to adjourn this evening.
Second?
Motion is made by Mayor Van Oster, seconded by Commissioner York to adjourn. Can I see a show of hands? Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much.